everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Ryan Beatty, Dreaming of David. This is the second studio album from Ryan following 2018's Boy in Jeans, a record that I thought was pretty okay overall. It certainly did have its highlights, including Ryan's voice, as well as his lyrics. However, I felt like as a whole, the project was just kind of underwhelming and maybe a bit underdeveloped overall. A lot of that record just kind of blurred together for me, and I felt like it was missing a certain something that really elevated above a lot of the other pop music out there in a vein similar to it. However, given some of these singles for this new album here, I was hoping that this project was going to hopefully have that certain something that I felt like was missing on Boy in Jeans, given that I felt like a lot of the singles for this thing were just a bit more interesting and a bit more complex sounding. And after giving this new record here a few listens, I could happily report that this album here is certainly a lot more interesting than Boy in Jeans was, and as a whole it definitely is a step in a bit of a new direction for Ryan as a whole. Overall, Dreaming of David is a project that feels a lot more focused than its preceding record. However, at the same time, it's a project that has a lot more different sounds and ideas that it's playing around with, even if it does feel a bit more to the point in some regards. The sound of this thing is one that is consistently dreamy and spacey sounding. A lot of the instrumentals here on this thing are pretty low-key sounding. Oftentimes when it comes to the instruments and sounds that are used here, there's a pretty wide variety of them. Certain tracks here will play around with a bit more synth-driven sounds, something a bit more electronic and spacey in that regard. However, other cuts on this thing will bring in some more natural-sounding instrumentation too, things like acoustic guitars, things of that sort. However, regardless of what instrumentals are being pulled together for these songs, they end up still having, like I said before, that very spacey and dreamy sound to them, which I guess makes sense given the fact that the title of this album literally has the word dreaming in it. When it comes to the vocals here on this project, they're also pretty interesting and somewhat complex too, mostly because on this thing Ryan's really pulling together lots of different vocal effects and manipulations and things of that sort in order to add a little extra something to his deliveries here on this thing. I think his general singing voice without any effects on it whatsoever is still pretty great sounding, and it does sound really nice when it does pop up here on this thing. However, on a lot of the tracks here with these vocal manipulations, it just makes for a very colorful vocal palette when it comes to the singing here on this record. It just adds a little something extra to these songs that makes them a bit more distinct from each other when put into the context of the record as a whole. I think the album starts off pretty strongly with the track In the End, which is this shorter track here. However, it's one that I still think has a lot of nice things going for it. I think the vocal performance here on this track is really great. I think the hook to this track is nice too. And I think the transition between this song and the following track, Dark Circles, is fantastic as well. And speaking of Dark Circles, it's probably my favorite song on this entire project. It has this very low-key electronic instrumental to it that I really like. Beatty's vocals here on the track have this kind of echoey, manipulated aspect to them that I really like as well. The track has a very catchy hook to it too, and it still has that kind of dark, somber sound to it that kind of pervades a lot of this project. And overall, I just think it's a fantastic cut, easily the best song on the entire record in my opinion, and certainly a song I'm going to be coming back to over and over again in the future. The track that immediately follows this one, Patchwork, is another great song on the record in my opinion. I think the vocal performance here on this track is again pretty great. There's another great hook here on this song too. The instrumental to this track goes for a bit more of a natural sound with a nice guitar line through it, but of course you do get some nice bass work here on this track as well, some nice drum work too. And I think the overall vibe of this track is one that just has a lot more tension to it than any of the two preceding songs on the record, and it just makes for a somewhat dark, tense listen. I still really like it though. I think it has a nice distinct personality to it compared to everything else on the project, and overall it's just a really nice pop song. Following this track though, I do think the album runs into this stretch of songs that I think is somewhat less interesting than the start and the end of this record as a whole. I wouldn't say any of these songs in the middle of this project are bad necessarily or even average. They're pretty decent overall. However, just compared to some of the songs at the start of this thing and some of the tracks at the tail end of this project, they're just a bit less interesting overall. They maintain the atmosphere of the record pretty nicely. I think the vocal performances on these tracks are still pretty solid too, and the lyrics to these songs are still really great, and they maintain that kind of dreamy, dark sound that's present throughout the rest of the project. It's just that comparatively speaking, I think some of the songs towards the middle of this record are just maybe a bit more forgettable compared to the start and the end of the project, I guess is what I'm trying to say. However, as I alluded to before, when you get to the last 3 tracks on the record, the very end of the record, I feel like the album picks up again in terms of the pace and the quality. I think the song Casino that comes towards the end of this thing is another really solid pop song here. The instrumental, again, is one that's pretty interesting and is able to pull off that natural sounding instrumentation aspect of things nicely as well. The lyrics here are pretty solid too. There's a nice catchy hook. Just a pretty solid pop song through and through. The track that immediately follows this one, Shimmer, is the longest song on the record, but one of the most interesting. I think the lyrics here on this track are some of the most interesting and emotive and deep on this entire project. They seem to be talking about Ryan and his relationship to his father to some extent here, and I just think overall they're really well written. I think the hook on this track is very catchy too. I think the atmosphere to this track is really great. Again, it has a very dark feel to it that is still able to maintain that very dreamy aspect that's present throughout the rest of this project really nicely. Overall, I think it's just a really great second to last song for the record, and when it comes to the last song on the record, the title track, I think it's a nice final moment to this project. Whereas the opening song to the record in the end was this kind of short, nice opener to the project, I feel like the title track kind of plays the same role, but only in the context of the end of the record. Again, it's a pretty straightforward, short song. However, it closes out the album in a very conclusive manner that I really like. I think the vocals here on this track are really great. Again, I like the vocal effects placed on Ryan's voice here on this song and how they're kind of higher pitched compared to a lot of the other vocals on this project. I like the lyrics here to this track as well. I think it does a nice job of tying together a lot of the themes on this record into a nice, very cohesive package to send you out on. I just think it's a really great closer to this thing, and it ties up a lot of the aspects to the record that were running throughout the project. Really, I couldn't ask for more from a closer. Overall, I think Dreaming of David is a really solid release. Again, I really like the direction that Ryan decided to go in here on this project. I like the very dark, dreamy atmosphere that's present throughout this project. I like the lyrics on this thing and how they deal with topics like paranoia and death throughout the record. I think it pairs up nicely with the instrumentals here. I think the vocals on this thing are pretty great too, especially with how diverse they could be when you take into account a lot of the different vocal effects that pop up throughout this project. I also really like a lot of the instrumentals here, especially on the first few and last few tracks on the project. My only real complaint with this record overall is that the middle portion of the record is just a fair bit weaker, I feel, compared to the start and the end of the project. Again, I don't feel like any of these songs in the middle of the album are bad necessarily. It's just that compared to some of the songs at the start of this thing and the end of this thing, they're just not quite as interesting. They have a lot of the core elements that make songs on this record great, but they just don't really excel outside of that. Even despite this album's kind of weak middle portion, I do think that the start of this record and the end of this record is very strong, and I like a lot of the tracks that appear in those two parts of the project. I think I'll certainly be coming back to tracks in those two parts of the album in the future. Overall, I think this is a decent project, one that you should certainly check out if you're a fan of this style of kind of weird indie alternative pop music. If you like that kind of sound, I think that this project is one that you should certainly hear. I think it's a different kind of record than Boy in Jeans, but at the same time, I think it's also a vast improvement over that record. So yeah, overall, that is just my own opinion on this project. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this record in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. Again, thank you for watching, and stay golden.